Happy Monday, y'all. Welcome back. Now, the Jesus movement didn't start as a new religion. It began as a Jewish renewal movement inside Second Temple Judaism. All right. In Acts, the earliest believers are still going to the temple every day. They're praying in the courts. They're seeing themselves as faithful Jews waiting for the restoration of Israel. So that break doesn't happen instantly. It grows as the apostles preach Jesus as the risen Messiah. That message challenges the authority structures of the temple establishment. So the first division in church history isn't Christians versus Jews, it's Jews who believe in Jesus versus Jews who don't. The book of Acts shows us this tension building from inside the Jewish world, not outside of it. So rock with me, y'all, as we take a look at the two first divisions. And here I'm all loosened up and I'm ready to work. So Stephen's speech in Acts 7 is the first major fracture point. He argues that God's presence was never limited to the temple and that Israel seems to have a pattern of rejecting God's messengers. Now that's a direct critique of the temple system. His execution marks the moment when the Jesus movement is no longer just a renewal group. You know what I'm saying? It's now seen as a threat. The letter to the Hebrews later gives the theological version of this break by saying Jesus is greater than Moses and that the old covenant is becoming obsolete. So so Acts gives the historical break, Hebrews gives the theological break. Trust me, y'all, this is going to challenge what y'all thought y'all knew about the text or about the faith or history and all of that. But trust me, it's going to help you grow. Let's keep going. So the next shock in church history is when Gentiles received the Holy Spirit without becoming Jews first. In Acts chapter 10 and 11, we see Peter watching the Spirit fall on Cornelius and his household, who are uncircumcised Gentiles. Now, this forces the early believers to rethink what defines the people of God. See, if God gives the Spirit before they adopt Jewish identity markers, i.e., circumcision, then the boundary lines are shifting, is what this means. The letter to the Hebrews supports this idea by presenting Jesus as the high priest for all humanity, not just Israel. Okay? The covenant is expanding beyond ethnic lines, which is very much against what we hear these black Hebrew Israelites talking. But that's a whole nother conversation. This faith is not about race or ethnicity anymore. Let's keep going. All right, we need six, y'all. We need six. So, as Paul and Barnabas preach to the Gentiles, the movement explodes among people who ain't never been part of the Jewish covenant. This creates the first doctrinal crisis. Do Gentiles need to be circumcised and keep the law of Moses to follow Israel's Messiah? Some believers from the Pharisee party said, yeah. Others say God was doing a new thing. This isn't a debate about works versus grace, though. Don't get that mixed up. Don't jump ahead, right? This is a debate about identity at this point. What marks someone as part of God's people now? This is what they were struggling with. In a lot of ways, I see that as still being an issue even today amongst new believers, or I should say young believers. You got people on TikTok doing all types of confusing bullshit out there. So, anyways, let's keep going. So, Acts chapter 15 records what the apostles' decision was. Gentiles do not need to be circumcised. Instead, they're asked to avoid four practices that were tied to idolatry and table fellowship, so Jews and Gentiles can share life together. This is the moment Christianity becomes a multi-ethnic community defined by allegiance to Jesus and not by the Mosaic boundary markers. The letter to the Hebrews reinforces this by saying that the new covenant is written on the heart and that Jesus' sacrifice replaces the old system. The people of God are now defined by faith, not ethnicity. So when I hear people on the internet trying to make this thing about race, you know what I'm saying, one type of people group over another, it's ridiculous and it's not historical. Anyways, y'all, All right, y'all. So let's go ahead and land this plane. Hebrews gives us the theological backbone for the Acts 15 decision. If Jesus' priesthood is superior to the Levitical priesthood, and if the old covenant is obsolete, then circumcision, food laws, and purity codes can't be the entrance requirements anymore. Access to God is through Jesus alone now. That's why the early church could welcome Gentiles without requiring them to become Jews. The break from Second Temple Judaism and the inclusion of Gentiles are two sides of the same New Covenant reality. So, trying to keep people under the Ten Commandments and following all of the laws of Moses is no longer a thing. Trying to make people adhere to strict dietary laws, that's not New Testament, y'all. And don't let anyone make you feel that it is. It's different now.